My in-laws thought they could waltz into my life, take over my house, and toss me aside like an old broken toy. Little did they know, the locks on my front door had a new song to sing, and it was a melody of permanent exclusion. My name is Arthur Vance, and I am 58 years old, a man who has always believed in hard work, quiet dignity, and the sacred trust of family. Willow Creek Heights, Ohio, has been my home for decades, a peaceful town where people generally know and respect one another. I built my life here, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, with the kind of steady effort that defines a man of my generation. My house, a solid two-story colonial with a sprawling garden that I tend to with almost religious fervor, was more than just a place to live. It was my sanctuary, a testament to years of dedication and careful planning. I wasn't a rich man, but I was comfortable, secure, and always willing to lend a helping hand to those I cared about. That caring, it turns out, was my greatest vulnerability, especially when it came to my wife, Cynthia, and her parents, Martha and Robert Peterson. Cynthia and I had been married for 30 years. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I always saw her as the gentle soul, sometimes a little naive, often easily swayed, but fundamentally good. Her parents, Martha and Robert, were a different story. They were always a bit grander than their means, always chasing the next big opportunity that somehow never quite panned out. Over the years, I had quietly, patiently, bailaid them out of numerous financial scrapes. A loan for a struggling business that never turned a profit, assistance with a medical bill that their insurance mysteriously didn't cover, even covering their rent for a few months when they were between places. I did it because they were family, because Cynthia would plead with me, her eyes wide and full of worry, and because I believed in supporting the people you love. I thought I was fostering a sense of security, building a stronger family unit. I thought they appreciated it, even if their gratitude was often expressed with a vague promise to repay me someday, a day that never seemed to arrive. I never asked for it back. Their presence in our lives was a constant hum, sometimes irritating, often exhausting, but I accepted it as part of the package deal that came with loving Cynthia. The current situation began innocently enough, or so I believed at the time. Martha and Robert had once again found themselves in dire straits. Their latest venture, a rather ill-conceived artisanal candle business, had spectacularly failed, leaving them not only broke but also without a permanent address. Cynthia, naturally, was distraught. She called me at my study one evening, her voice trembling. "Arthur," she began, "Mom and Dad have nowhere to go. They're talking about staying in a motel, and you know how Martha hates motels. It's just for a little while, darling, just until they get back on their feet. A few weeks, maybe a month or two at most." My heart, ever the soft spot for Cynthia's distress, stirred with familiar compassion. I looked around my quiet, comfortable home. It was big enough. We had a spare bedroom on the first floor that we mostly used for storage, and a guest suite upstairs that hadn't seen a visitor in years. "Of course, Cynthia," I said, my voice gentle. "Tell them they're welcome. We'll make it work." And so they arrived, not with humble gratitude but with a certain air of expectation. They came with more luggage than I thought possible for a temporary stay, and immediately began to unpack, not just into their designated guest room, but into my life. Martha, with her perfectly coiffed silver hair and a perpetually critical glint in her eyes, started reorganizing my kitchen cabinets within an hour of arrival. Robert, a large man with a booming laugh that could quickly turn into a bellow of indignation, took over my favorite armchair in the living room and claimed the television remote as his personal scepter. Within days, the guest room on the first floor had become Martha's new crafting studio, filled with the pungent smell of melted wax and essential oils, and the upstairs guest suite, which I had offered, was deemed too far from the kitchen by Robert. So they settled into the living room, effectively turning it into their private domain, complete with their own portable television and stacks of magazines that were never quite put away. My routines, once so carefully cultivated, began to unravel. My morning coffee, usually a peaceful ritual on the porch, was now interrupted by Robert's loud conversations on his speakerphone. My evening reading was drowned out by Martha's true crime documentaries played at full volume. But I kept silent. I reminded myself they were family. They were guests. They would leave. I just needed to be patient. I bit my tongue, smiled politely, and continued to provide. I paid for their groceries, their endless small needs, even their entertainment fund, which inexplicably included trips to the local casino. I was the rock, the provider, the silent benefactor. I was Arthur, and I was being taken for granted, but I had no idea just how deeply their ingratitude ran, or what dark plans were already brewing beneath their veneer of polite, if demanding, guests. My generosity, I would soon learn, wasn't just being taken for granted. It was being meticulously leveraged against me, and the revelation of their true intentions would shatter my world, forcing me to confront a betrayal I never imagined possible. The first subtle hints of their true intentions were easy to dismiss as mere overstepping, typical of Martha and Robert. They moved my antique grandfather clock from the hallway to the garage, claiming it was too loud and clashed with their aesthetic. They replaced my comfortable, worn sofa with a new, garish floral one, citing dust mites as the reason. They did all of this without asking, simply presenting it as a fait accompli. Cynthia, bless her heart, would wring her hands and offer a weak maybe we should have asked Arthur first, Mom. But her protests were quickly overridden by Martha's dismissive wave and Robert's booming, "Nonsense, dear girl. Arthur is a man of simple tastes. He'll appreciate the upgrade." And I, in my quiet way, would just sigh and move my reading chair to a less trafficked corner, trying to maintain the peace, trying to believe that this was all just a temporary inconvenience. The real shock came on a Tuesday afternoon, a day I had scheduled for a rare midweek golf game. I had left my wallet in my study and realized it just as I was backing out of the driveway. Annoyed with myself, I parked the car and re-entered the house, expecting it to be empty. The car was still running and the front door was ajar, a small detail that saved me from missing the most devastating conversation of my life. As I stepped inside, intending to quickly grab my wallet, I heard voices, hushed but clear, coming from the living room. It was Martha and Cynthia. I froze, not wanting to interrupt what sounded like a private discussion. But then a few words caught my attention, words that twisted my stomach into a cold, hard knot. "He's hardly ever here anymore." Martha's voice, usually so sharp, was laced with a venomous sweetness. "Always out, puttering in the garden or with his silly golf. It's perfect, Cynthia, he'll never suspect a thing." My heart hammered against my ribs. Suspect what? I leaned closer to the archway, hidden by the shadows of the hallway. "But Mom," Cynthia's voice hesitant, almost a whisper, "he's been so good to us. He let you move in. It feels wrong." "Wrong?" Martha scoffed, a sound that grated on my ears. "What's wrong is that he's hoarding this beautiful house all to himself while we're scraping by. It's your home too, darling. You married him. Half of everything is yours legally. And with us here establishing residency, well, it's a slam dunk." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Establishing residency. Half of everything. What were they talking about? Then Robert's voice chimed in, gruff but reassuring. "Your mother is right, Cynthia. We just need to accelerate the process. Arthur's getting on, he's set in his ways. He won't fight it. We'll simply make it clear that he needs to downsize. Sell this place, split the proceeds, and you, your mother, and I can find somewhere suitable, something more modern without all his old-fashioned clutter. Sell this place. My house, my sanctuary, my home." My blood ran cold. It wasn't just about moving furniture or controlling the television remote anymore. This was a full-blown hostile takeover. They were planning to force me out of my own home, the house I had worked tirelessly for, the house where every memory of my life with Cynthia, even the good ones, resided. And Cynthia, my wife, my partner of 30 years, was not only aware of it but seemed to be a willing, if reluctant, participant. The wrong she felt was not for me, but for the feeling of doing wrong, not the act itself. I gripped the doorframe, knuckles white, the golf game utterly forgotten. My stomach churned, a mixture of profound shock, searing anger, and an unbearable ache of betrayal. They had been living under my roof, eating my food, spending my money, all while plotting my eviction, my displacement. They saw me not as a husband, a son-in-law, or a benefactor, but as an obstacle, a hurdle to be overcome in their relentless pursuit of a comfortable life they felt entitled to. The casual cruelty of their words, the way they spoke about my future as if it were theirs to dictate, solidified a resolve within me that I hadn't known I possessed. They wanted a fight. They would get one, but it would be on my terms, in a way they would never see coming. I quietly backed away from the archway, closing the front door with barely a whisper, then reopening it with a deliberate creak, making enough noise to signal my return. I walked in, feigning a frustrated sigh. "Forgot my wallet," I announced, my voice sounding unnaturally normal, a stark contrast to the earthquake raging inside me. Cynthia and Martha jumped, startled. "Oh, Arthur, you're back," Cynthia said, her cheeks slightly flushed. "Yes, just grabbing this," I replied, forcing a smile that felt like shattered glass on my lips. I retrieved my wallet, nodding curtly at them both, then walked out, the front door closing behind me with a soft click. The golf course never saw me that day. Instead, I drove aimlessly, my mind a storm of disbelief and cold, calculated rage. They were playing a dangerous game, but they had severely underestimated their opponent. This was my home, and nobody, not even my family, was going to take it from me. The casual cruelty of their words, the way they spoke about my future as if it were theirs to dictate, solidified a resolve within me that I hadn't known I possessed. They wanted a fight. They would get one, but it would be on my terms, in a way they would never see coming. The next few days were a blur of polite smiles and internal chaos. I moved through my home like a ghost, observing, listening, every interaction filtered through the bitter lens of betrayal. My golf clubs remained untouched in the garage. My garden, usually my solace, seemed to mock me with its tranquil beauty, a stark contrast to the turmoil within. I ate dinner with Martha, Robert, and Cynthia, feigning interest in Robert's latest conspiracy theory about the government and Martha's endless critiques of my antique dinner plates, all the while my mind was racing, building a fortress of legal and practical defense. The first step was to discreetly confirm my ownership of the house. I knew, intellectually, that the house was solely in my name. I had bought it years before I met Cynthia, and when we married, I had deliberately kept it separate, a decision made out of prudence, not distrust, at the advice of a financial planner. But the seed of doubt planted by Martha's words, "Half of everything is yours legally," gnawed at me. So the very next morning, under the pretense of updating some old paperwork, I visited the county recorder's office. I requested a copy of the deed, a document I had seen countless times, but now I scrutinized every line, every signature. There it was, clear as day, Arthur Vance, sole owner. No joint tenancy, no other names. A small victory, but a significant one. It was the first stone in the invisible wall I was building. My next stop was a quiet, unassuming law office in downtown Willow Creek Heights, one I had driven past for years but never had reason to enter. Mr. Harrison, an older gentleman with a kind face and a sharp legal mind, listened patiently as I laid out the situation, omitting the overheard conversation initially, framing it as "my in-laws are visiting, and their behavior has become quite intrusive." I spoke in measured tones, carefully selecting my words, not wanting to sound like a man unhinged, even though my world felt very much unhinged. When I finally revealed the conversation I had overheard, Mr. Harrison's expression shifted. His kind eyes hardened with understanding. He explained the legal intricacies of adverse possession, something difficult for them to claim if I was still living in the house, but he acknowledged the very real threat of marital asset division should Cynthia pursue divorce. "Your home, Mr. Vance, is an asset you owned before marriage. It should be relatively protected. However, if funds acquired during the marriage were used to improve the property, or if your wife could claim she contributed significantly to its upkeep, things could get complicated. And then there's the issue of establishing residency for your in-laws. While they don't have a claim to ownership, making them leave without proper legal procedure if they decided to dig in could be a drawn-out affair." "So," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "how do I protect myself? How do I make sure they understand that this is my house and they have no claim?" Mr. Harrison leaned back, stroking his chin. "First, Absolutely do not give them any reason to claim you've abandoned the property. Continue living there as normal, but be vigilant. Second, we need to serve them with a formal notice to vacate. This is a crucial step if they refuse to leave voluntarily. Third, and perhaps most immediately effective, is to secure your property physically. Change the locks. It's your house. You have every right to control who enters it, and if they cause any damage or refuse to leave, will involve law enforcement. The idea of changing the locks resonated deeply. It was simple, direct, and undeniable. It was the physical manifestation of reclaiming my boundaries, but I couldn't do it haphazardly. It had to be done without them knowing. This would require precision, stealth, and a touch of theatrical timing. Over the next week, I became a master of covert operations. I started keeping a detailed journal, documenting every instance of their intrusive behavior, every expense I incurred due to their presence, every critical remark Martha made about my life choices. I wrote down the dates, times, and specific comments. It felt almost therapeutic, turning my anger into actionable data. I called my bank, ensuring all my personal accounts were separate from any joint accounts I shared with Cynthia. I reviewed my will, making sure my wishes were clear and that the house would remain mine to pass on as I saw fit, untainted by their greedy schemes. The most crucial step was the locks. I called a reputable locksmith from a neighboring town, not wanting to use anyone local who might recognize my house or gossip. I explained I was upgrading security due to a recent spate of minor break-ins in the area, a plausible lie to give to the locksmith, and an even more plausible one if my in-laws somehow stumbled upon the information. I arranged for him to come on a Friday afternoon, a time I knew Martha and Robert always went to their favorite discount department store, and Cynthia usually accompanied them. I even subtly encouraged the outing, mentioning a sale on certain items I knew Martha coveted. The locksmith, a quiet young man named Kevin, arrived promptly. I had him replace every exterior lock on the house, the front door, the back door, the side door leading to the garage, and even the small entry to my garden shed. I opted for high-security, tamper-proof locks, ensuring that even if they managed to get a key made from an old one, it wouldn't work. I watched him meticulously work, each click of the drill, each turn of the screwdriver, a symphony of quiet rebellion. When he handed me the new set of keys, heavy and solid in my palm, I felt a surge of exhilaration. This was it. This was my trump card. I made sure to pay him in cash, requesting a simple, unidentifiable receipt. While the locks were being changed, Martha and Robert were at home, oblivious, continuing their pattern of increasingly arrogant behavior. They started to openly discuss our plans for the house. Martha talked about tearing out the old wallpaper in the dining room and replacing it with something more contemporary. Robert sketched out designs for a new deck, entirely replacing the one I had carefully maintained for 20 years, scoffing at my simple tastes. They even started inviting their own friends over without consulting me, hosting loud card games in my living room, filling the air with cigar smoke and boisterous laughter. They acted as if they owned the place, as if I were merely a live-in caretaker, tolerated only as long as I provided. Cynthia remained largely passive, her usual quietness morphing into a nervous fidgeting. She avoided my gaze, and when I tried to engage her in conversation, she would offer vague responses, her eyes darting between me and her parents. It became clear to me that she was not just an unwitting victim of her parents' machinations. She was, at best, a willing accessory, too weak or too ambitious to stand up for her own husband. This realization was a deeper cut than any insult Martha or Robert could hurl. It was a profound and bitter understanding of the woman I had spent 3 decades of my life with. The love I felt for her, once a warm, comforting blanket, now felt like a frayed, threadbare shroud. I continued to play the part of the compliant husband and son-in-law, listening to their endless demands, offering polite suggestions that were immediately shot down, and all the while, the steel resolve within me grew harder, sharper. Each click of the new locks, each carefully filed document, each hushed conversation with my lawyer, felt like another stone meticulously placed in the invisible wall I was building around myself. a wall they would soon crash into, completely unprepared. I just needed the right moment, the perfect opportunity to spring the trap. And that moment I knew was fast approaching. I would not allow them to define my future, nor would I allow them to steal the peace and security I had painstakingly built over a lifetime. The stage was set, though they had no inkling of it. I had spent the entire morning of the appointed day, a sunny Saturday, tending to my rose bushes, pruning and fertilizing with a meticulousness that belied the storm brewing within me. My hands, calloused from years of work, moved with practiced ease, but my mind was elsewhere, anticipating the confrontation that loomed. I had arranged for Mr. Harrison, my lawyer, to be present, not overtly, but nearby. He would be in his car, parked a block down, ready to approach when I gave him the signal. I wanted witnesses, legal backing, and the firm resolve that only an impartial professional can provide in such an emotionally charged situation. Martha, Robert, and Cynthia had gone out early that morning, ostensibly to attend a vintage market that Martha had heard about. I knew, however, that their real mission was likely to purchase more items for their house, perhaps even some new drapes that Martha had been eyeing, convinced they would perfectly complement her chosen aesthetic for my living room. They had left, as usual, without a word of where they were going or when they would return, simply announcing their departure by slamming the front door shut, leaving me in the sudden, eerie silence of my own home. The hours dragged on, each minute stretching into an eternity. I cleaned my study, organized my books, and polished the antique desk I had inherited from my grandfather. Every action was a way to ground myself, to control the tremors of anger and anxiety that rippled through me. I practiced in my mind the exact words I would say, the calm, unwavering tone I would adopt. I envisioned their faces, their reactions, preparing myself for the inevitable onslaught of fury and disbelief. It was almost 5 o'clock when I heard the familiar rumble of Robert's beat-up sedan turning into my driveway. My heart gave a powerful lurch, a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. This was it. The moment of reckoning had arrived. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my shirt, and walked calmly to the front window. They piled out of the car, arms laden with shopping bags. Martha, her face flushed with the exertion of carrying several ornate throw pillows, led the charge. Robert followed, grumbling under the weight of a large, gaudy ceramic planter. Cynthia trailed behind them, a smaller bag clutched in her hand, her shoulders hunched. They looked exactly as I expected them to look, triumphant, acquisitive, and completely oblivious. Martha reached the front door first, fumbling in her large handbag for her key. She inserted it into the lock, gave it a turn, and pushed. The door remained steadfastly shut. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. "Darn thing," she muttered, trying again, harder this time. Still the lock held. Robert, having finally wrestled the planter onto the porch, puffed out his chest. "Let me, Martha, you're too delicate for such things." He took the key from her, inserted it with a flourish, and turned. Nothing. He tried another key, then another, growing more frustrated with each failed attempt. His face, usually ruddy, began to pale. "What in the blazes?" he bellowed, rattling the doorknob with increasing force. "This lock is jammed." Cynthia, her eyes wide with a dawning apprehension, stepped forward. "Here, Mom, let me try my key." She took her own key, a duplicate I had given her years ago, and inserted it. She turned, gently at first, then with more force. The lock did not yield. A beat of stunned silence descended upon the porch, broken only by the nervous chirping of a robin in the nearby oak tree. They exchanged bewildered glances, their faces a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. They tried the other doors, the side door, the back door, the garage entry. Each attempt was met with the same unyielding resistance. Panic began to set in, a visible tremor running through Martha's hands, a widening of Robert's eyes. That was my cue. I opened the front door from the inside, stepping out onto the porch, my hands tucked casually into my pockets. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, but my expression was clear, calm, and utterly devoid of warmth. In my right hand, almost idly, I jingled a new set of keys, the keys to the freshly changed locks. Their heads snapped towards me, eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Martha dropped one of her new throw pillows, and it landed with a soft thump. "Arthur!" Martha exclaimed, her voice shrill. "What have you done?" "The locks are all jammed, we can't get in." I met her gaze directly, my voice low and steady, each word carefully chosen. "The locks aren't jammed, Martha, I had them changed." I lifted my hand slightly, letting the new keys clink softly. "These are the only ones that work now." Robert's face, already pale, turned an unhealthy shade of gray. "Changed them? What in the name of?" "Why would you do such a thing, Arthur?" "Because," I replied, my voice gaining a quiet steel, "this is my house, and I have decided that it's time for you to leave." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Cynthia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Martha's jaw dropped, her perfectly made-up face contorting with a mixture of disbelief and outrage. "Your house," Martha shrieked, finding her voice. "This is our home now, we live here, we've been living here for months. You can't just kick us out, Arthur. This is illegal." I shook my head slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. "No, Martha, this is my house, solely mine. I bought it before I married Cynthia, and the deed is in my name alone. You are guests who have, I'm afraid, vastly overstayed their welcome. And as for being illegal, I assure you, it is perfectly within my rights as the homeowner to change the locks and to ask uninvited guests to vacate my property." Then, as if on cue, a car pulled up to the curb a little way down the street. It was Mr. Harrison, my lawyer, stepping out of his vehicle, a crisp, official-looking document in his hand. He walked purposefully towards us, his presence adding an undeniable weight to my words. He nodded curtly to me, then turned his gaze to Martha and Robert. "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson," Mr. Harrison began, his voice calm and authoritative. "I am Mr. Harrison, legal counsel for Mr. Arthur Vance. I have here a formal notice to vacate the premises, effective immediately. As you have no legal right of residency or ownership here, your continued presence constitutes trespass." He held out the document towards Martha. Martha stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. "Trespass? This is ridiculous. Cynthia, tell them this is our home." All eyes turned to Cynthia. She stood there, frozen, tears welling in her eyes, her face a mask of shame and fear. She looked at her mother, then at her father, and finally her gaze fell on me. The appeal in her eyes was desperate, but I met it with a cold, unwavering stare. The complicity, the betrayal, had severed any emotional cords that might have once bound us. Robert, ever the blusterer, tried one last desperate tactic. "This is harassment, Arthur. We'll call the police. They'll sort this out." "You can't just do this to family." "Actually," Mr. Harrison interjected smoothly, "we have already informed the local authorities of the situation, and they are aware that Mr. Vance is acting entirely within his legal rights as the homeowner. Any attempt to re-enter the property will be met with appropriate legal action." The wind seemed to drain from Robert's sails. He looked around wildly, his blustering defiance deflating into confused helplessness. Martha, however, was far from giving up. She lunged forward, her hand reaching out as if to slap the notice from Mr. Harrison's hand. "You conniving old man, you think you can just trick us like this, after everything we've done for you, after all the love Cynthia has given you?" I stepped forward, placing myself between Martha and Mr. Harrison. My voice, though quiet, cut through her rage like a sharp blade. "Love? You call this love, Martha? Plotting to steal my home, to discard me like refuse, all while living off my generosity? No. That isn't love, that is greed, and I have had enough." The sight of my unwavering resolve, combined with Mr. Harrison's calm legal authority, finally seemed to break them. Martha's face crumpled and she let out a strangled sob, burying her face in Robert's shoulder. Robert, for once, was speechless, simply staring at the closed door, the new locks a silent, insurmountable barrier. Cynthia, meanwhile, had sunk onto the steps, her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "You have 30 minutes to collect any personal belongings you can carry," I stated, my voice firm. "Anything left behind will be bagged and taken to a storage unit, the cost of which will be billed directly to you. After 30 minutes, the property will be secured, and you will not be permitted re-entry." The silence that followed their frantic attempts to enter, broken only by the chirping of a lone robin, was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Their faces, contorted with disbelief and fury, were a canvas of their own undoing, and for the first time in months I felt truly, profoundly at peace. The next 30 minutes were a blur of frantic activity and shouted accusations. Martha and Robert, spurred by Mr. Harrison's stern reminders and the looming threat of the police, scrambled through the back door, which I had unlocked for their hasty exit. They grabbed what they could, tossing clothes and toiletries into their suitcases with a desperate haste. They continued to hurl insults at me through the open door, calling me heartless, ungrateful, and a cruel old man. I stood on the porch observing their chaotic retreat, my expression impassive. Cynthia, still on the steps, slowly rose and walked towards me. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked utterly broken. "Arthur," she whispered, her voice raw, "please don't do this. Where will they go? Where will I go?" My gaze was steady, unwavering. "Cynthia," I said, my voice devoid of emotion, "you made your choice when you let your parents plot against me, when you stayed silent while they made plans to take my home. This is the consequence of that choice. As for where you will go, that is a decision you must make. I will instruct Mr. Harrison to prepare divorce papers. You will, of course, be entitled to your share of the marital assets accumulated during our marriage. But this house, my home, is not part of that equation. You have 24 hours to collect your personal belongings. After that, the locks will remain changed and your access will be terminated." Her face fell, the last vestiges of hope draining from her eyes. She looked from me to her parents, who were now dragging their overstuffed luggage to their car, glaring back at me with unbridled hatred. Without another word, Cynthia turned and walked away, her shoulders slumped, her once proud stride now a weary shuffle. She climbed into the passenger seat of Robert's car, and a moment later, with a screech of tires, they were gone. The driveway was empty. My house stood silent, bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. Mr. Harrison waited patiently until the car was out of sight. "Well, Mr. Vance," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips, "that was handled with remarkable composure. A model of elegant justice, if I do say so myself." I simply nodded, a profound sense of exhaustion washing over me, followed swiftly by an overwhelming feeling of relief. The fight was over. The battle for my home, for my peace, was won. The immediate aftermath was quiet, almost eerily so. The house, stripped of the clatter and demands of my in-laws, felt expansive, breathable again. I walked through each room, noticing the small details that had been altered: the strange floral sofa in my living room, the lingering smell of Martha's artisanal candles in the former guest room. These were wounds, but they were superficial, easily healed. Over the next few days, I systematically reclaimed my space. The new sofa was quickly donated to a local charity. My grandfather clock was retrieved from the garage and returned to its rightful place in the hallway, its comforting tick-tock filling the silence. I repainted the dining room, choosing a soothing shade of sage green, washing away the memory of Martha's grand plans. Cynthia collected her belongings the next day, in a surprisingly subdued and swift manner while I was out. She left a brief note, not of apology but of resignation, acknowledging the end of our marriage. The divorce proceedings, though emotionally difficult, were straightforward. With Mr. Harrison's expert guidance, the premarital assets, including my house, were unequivocally protected. Cynthia received a fair settlement based on our shared marital assets, enough to establish a new life, but not enough to support her parents' lavish expectations. As for Martha and Robert Peterson, their karma was swift and merciless. Without my quiet financial support, their lives quickly unraveled. Their reputation in Willow Creek Heights, a town where word travels fast, was utterly shattered. People heard about their brazen attempt to usurp my home, and the sympathy they once garnered for their financial woes evaporated, replaced by polite avoidance and thinly veiled scorn. Their candle business debts, which I had previously helped manage, resurfaced, and without me to bail them out, they faced bankruptcy. They were forced to move into a tiny, run-down apartment in a less desirable part of the state, their dreams of grandeur replaced by the harsh reality of their own making. I heard through the grapevine that their endless bickering and blaming grew even worse, a constant cacophony of their own discontent. In the quiet evenings, as I sat on my porch, watching the fireflies dance in my meticulously tended garden, I often reflected on the lessons learned. Loyalty, I realized, is not a given, even among family. It is earned, nurtured, and must be reciprocated. My generosity had been mistaken for weakness, my patience for passivity. I had been underestimated, seen as a mere wallet, a means to an end. But beneath the calm exterior there had always been a core of steel, a steadfast determination to protect what was mine, built through years of honest effort. The pain of the betrayal, especially from Cynthia, lingered like a phantom ache, but it no longer consumed me. It had transformed into wisdom, a clearer understanding of human nature. I learned that true strength lies not in explosive anger, but in quiet resolve, in meticulous planning, and in the unwavering pursuit of justice, however elegantly delivered. My home, my sanctuary, was once again truly mine, filled not with the echoes of their greed, but with the peaceful hum of a life reclaimed. I had lost a marriage, but I had gained back my self-respect, my peace of mind, and the profound satisfaction of knowing that, in the end, truth and justice, meticulously prepared and calmly executed, always find their way home. My life in Willow Creek Heights, Ohio, continues, but now it is lived with open eyes, a stronger heart, and an unshakable understanding that while I will always offer a helping hand, I will never again allow it to be bitten. The silence in my home is a comforting balm, a testament to the elegant justice that prevailed, reminding me that some lessons are learned the hard way, but they are learned nonetheless. The silence in my home is a comforting balm, a testament to the elegant justice that prevailed, reminding me that some lessons are learned the hard way, but they are learned nonetheless. In the weeks and months that followed, my house transformed from a battleground of wills into a true sanctuary once more. The physical changes were the easiest to implement. I hired a professional cleaning service to meticulously deep clean every room, scrubbing away the lingering smells of melted wax, cigar smoke, and the faint, unsettling scent of entitlement. The gaudy floral sofa was a distant memory, replaced by a new, comfortable leather one that perfectly complemented the warm tones of my living room. My antique grandfather clock chimed the hours from its original spot in the hallway, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat in the quiet of my reclaimed home. I spent countless hours in my garden, finding solace in the earth, the vibrant colors of my roses, and the simple rhythm of growth. Each weed pulled, each new bloom tended, felt like a small act of healing, a reaffirmation of my presence and ownership over my own life. The garden, once a peaceful refuge, now became a powerful symbol of my resilience, a place where order and beauty were meticulously cultivated, just as I was now carefully cultivating my renewed peace of mind. I often thought about Cynthia, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sadness. The woman I had married, the gentle soul I believed her to be, had been overshadowed by a weak will and an unfortunate susceptibility to her parents' manipulative schemes. The pain of her betrayal had dulled, but the scar remained, a constant reminder of how easily trust could be broken, even by those closest to you. Our divorce was finalized swiftly, thanks to Mr. Harrison's expert handling. Cynthia received her portion of the marital assets, enough for her to start anew, as I had predicted. I heard she moved to a smaller town, away from Willow Creek Heights, perhaps seeking anonymity from the whispers and knowing glances that inevitably followed her parents' public downfall. I wished her no ill will, only a quiet hope that she might one day find the strength to stand on her own, independent of the corrosive influence that had cost her so much. My focus, however, was no longer on her or her past choices, but on the future I was building for myself, a future defined by my own terms and values. The absence of Martha and Robert was a palpable relief, like a persistent headache finally receding. Their loud arguments, Robert's booming pronouncements, and Martha's endless criticisms no longer echoed through my hallways. The silence was profound, and in that silence I found clarity. I discovered new hobbies, things I had always wanted to try but never had the time or energy for, constantly consumed by their needs. I joined a local woodworking club, learning to carve intricate designs into pieces of cherry and oak, finding a quiet satisfaction in shaping something beautiful with my own hands. I started volunteering at the local library, organizing shelves and helping patrons find their next great read. It was a simple way to connect with my community, to offer my time and effort without the expectation of anything in return, and without the fear of being taken advantage of. These new endeavors filled my days with purpose, reinforcing the joy of contributing to something meaningful, far removed from the parasitic demands that had once defined my life. Willow Creek Heights, as I knew it, was a town where news, especially concerning local families, traveled with remarkable speed. While I never openly discussed the details of my in-laws' eviction or my divorce, the truth, or at least a version of it, had permeated the community. Neighbors who had once offered polite nods now approached me with quiet expressions of support, a knowing look in their eyes. Mr. Henderson, a retired schoolteacher who lived across the street, stopped me one afternoon while I was retrieving my mail. "Arthur," he said, his voice gentle, "I just wanted to say you handled yourself with remarkable dignity through all of this. Not many men would have been able to keep their head." I simply offered him a small, grateful smile. His words, though few, spoke volumes, confirming that my quiet resolve had not gone unnoticed. I wasn't looking for praise, but the subtle acknowledgement from my peers helped solidify the feeling that I had acted justly, not out of malice, but out of a necessity to protect my home and my very being. My once blind generosity had been tempered by experience. I was still a man willing to lend a helping hand, but now, that hand came with a clear understanding of boundaries. If a friend needed assistance, I would offer it freely, but with a discerning eye. No longer would I allow myself to be seen as an endless resource, a silent ATM for others' irresponsible choices. I learned to say no politely but firmly, to protect my time, my resources, and my peace of mind. This newfound assertiveness wasn't born of bitterness, but of self-respect. It was the wisdom that comes from having one's kindness exploited and deciding unequivocally that it would never happen again. This was the strength that lay beneath the calm exterior, the quiet steel that had emerged from the fire of betrayal. I found that people, surprisingly, respected this new boundary. They appreciated the clear expectations, and those who didn't, well, they simply faded from my life, making room for more genuine connections. I also rediscovered the simple pleasures of my own company. Without the constant chatter and demands, I had time for introspection. I began to read more, delving into histories and biographies, finding parallels between the struggles of others and my own journey. My study, once a refuge from the chaos of my in-laws, became a vibrant intellectual space, filled with the scent of old books and the hum of my own thoughts. I started cooking again, experimenting with new recipes, enjoying the process of creating something nourishing for myself. These were not grand gestures of self-care, but quiet, deliberate acts of living, each one reinforcing the fact that my happiness was no longer dependent on the approval or presence of others. It was a happiness I cultivated from within, rooted in self-sufficiency and an honest appreciation for the life I had built. One evening, several months after everything had settled, I was dining alone in my kitchen, enjoying a perfectly roasted chicken and a glass of red wine. The radio played soft jazz, a comforting background to the gentle ticking of my wall clock. The phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then picked it up. It was a real estate agent from a city 2 states away. "Mr. Vance," she asked, her voice professional and polite. "I'm calling on behalf of Martha and Robert Peterson. They're looking to sell some property they own, and your name was listed as a previous financial guarantor on some of their loans. We're trying to ascertain if there are any outstanding liens or claims against their assets." I listened, my mind quickly piecing together the situation. Without my constant bailouts, the debts they had amassed were finally catching up to them. The property they owned was likely some long-forgotten, run-down parcel of land they had invested in years ago, always hoping for a quick profit. I calmly explained that I had no legal or financial ties to Martha and Robert Peterson whatsoever, and that any claims I might have had were settled during my divorce from Cynthia. The agent apologized for the inconvenience and quickly ended the call. That brief phone call was a confirmation, not of malice, but of the relentless logic of karma. It wasn't my doing. It was simply the consequence of their own choices, now playing out without an external safety net. There was no triumph in my heart, only a quiet understanding. They had sought to take what wasn't theirs, to build their comfort on the ruins of my peace. Now, they were left to navigate the wreckage of their own making, a future dictated by their own irresponsibility and greed. It was a stark reminder of the fragile balance between generosity and self-preservation, a balance I had now learned to maintain with unwavering resolve. My house, my garden, my quiet life in Willow Creek Heights all stood as a testament to this truth, a permanent monument to the strength found in elegant justice. I looked around my kitchen at the warm glow of the lights, the familiar comfort of my surroundings. This was my haven, built brick by brick, dollar by dollar, and defended with a quiet courage I hadn't known I possessed. My life was not devoid of challenges, but now I faced them with a clear head and an unshakable sense of self-worth. The scars of betrayal had faded, replaced by the resilience of a man who had faced the depths of ingratitude and emerged stronger, wiser, and ultimately free. I finished my meal, cleared the dishes, and stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the cool night air. The stars twinkled above Willow Creek Heights, silent witnesses to the quiet dignity of a life reclaimed. I knew that the future, whatever it held, would be faced on my terms, with integrity as my guide and the unwavering conviction that some things, like the sanctity of one's home and the peace of one's heart, are worth fighting for, even if the battle is fought with quiet strategy and elegant justice, leaving behind a legacy not of anger, but of unshakable truth. My story in Willow Creek Heights continues, a testament to the enduring power of a man who, though underestimated, ultimately found his strength in the very depths of betrayal, forging a future built not on what was lost, but on what was fiercely and finally reclaimed. My story in Willow Creek Heights continues, a testament to the enduring power of a man who, though underestimated, ultimately found his strength in the very depths of betrayal, forging a future built not on what was lost, but on what was fiercely and finally reclaimed. The passage of time, an inevitable river, smoothed the sharp edges of my recent past, transforming raw wounds into tempered scars. Each morning, I would wake to the gentle light filtering through my bedroom window, a light no longer obscured by the shadow of impending conflict. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds, these were the sounds that greeted me, not the boisterous demands of Robert or the critical pronouncements of Martha. I had regained the serene rhythm of my own life, a melody composed of my choices, my pace, and my profound peace. My garden, my perennial joy, flourished under my renewed attention. I spent hours among my roses, deadheading spent blooms, carefully pruning errant branches and enriching the soil. Each act was a metaphor for my own life, nurturing growth, removing what was harmful and creating a strong foundation for beauty. The earth beneath my hands, the scent of damp soil and fragrant petals, grounded me, reminding me of the simple, tangible realities of life, far removed from the complex deceits of human ambition. I found a deep, quiet satisfaction in watching the changing seasons in my garden, a predictable cycle of life and renewal that offered a comforting contrast to the unpredictable chaos I had endured. It was a private world, one I cultivated with love and dedication, just as I was now cultivating a life of peace and self-reliance. My restored study became a haven for contemplation and learning. I delved into books I had long meant to read, histories of civilizations, biographies of resilient figures, and even some works of philosophy. I found myself drawn to stories of quiet strength, of individuals who faced adversity not with aggression, but with intellect and unwavering resolve. My antique desk, inherited from my grandfather, held not just important papers, but also my journal where I continued to record my thoughts, not about grievances, but about insights, reflections, and the quiet joys of my days. Writing became a form of ongoing therapy, allowing me to process lingering emotions, to see patterns, and to understand the profound shift that had occurred within me. I was no longer just Arthur Vance, the generous husband, the easy mark. I was Arthur Vance, the man who had reclaimed his sovereignty, tempered by fire, and forged into something resilient and truly independent. The silence in my home was no longer a void but a fertile ground for thought, creativity, and self-discovery. It was a silence that spoke volumes of liberation. The town of Willow Creek Heights, with its network of intertwining lives, continued to be a fascinating observer of human nature. While I never gossiped, nor sought to spread ill will, the truth of what had transpired had a way of seeping into the public consciousness. Subtle shifts in social dynamics became apparent. Some acquaintances, those who had perhaps witnessed Martha and Robert's increasingly entitled behavior, offered quiet words of solidarity or knowing glances that conveyed unspoken understanding. Others who had been less privy to the full story simply respected my privacy, acknowledging the visible change in my demeanor, a new firmness in my gaze, a quiet confidence that replaced the weary patience I once wore. I found that I was more present in conversations, more authentic in my interactions. The burden of pretending, of maintaining an illusion of normalcy for the sake of peace, had been lifted. I could now engage with others as my true self, unburdened by the secrets and silent resentments that had once weighed me down. My involvement with the local woodworking club deepened, becoming a cherished part of my weekly routine. The scent of sawdust and fresh-cut lumber, the rhythmic whir of saws and the gentle tap of chisels, these were the new sounds of my productive leisure. I found a camaraderie there, a shared passion for craftsmanship, and the satisfaction of creating something tangible from raw material. My hands, once accustomed to tending a garden and signing checks for others, now found joy in shaping wood, transforming a rough block into a polished, functional piece of art. I completed a handsome oak rocking chair for my porch, each joint perfectly fitted, each curve smooth to a soft finish. It was more than just a chair. It was a symbol of my new life, built with precision, strength, and an unwavering commitment to quality. The satisfaction I derived from these creative pursuits was immense, a stark contrast to the hollow feeling that had often accompanied my previous acts of generosity towards my in-laws. This was generosity towards myself, an investment in my own well-being and happiness. The library volunteering was equally fulfilling. Organizing books, helping children find stories, and assisting patrons with research filled my afternoons with a different kind of purpose. It was a quiet contribution to the community, a way to give back without expectation or personal cost. I enjoyed the thoughtful conversations with fellow volunteers and the wide-eyed wonder of young readers discovering new worlds within the pages of a book. It was a simple, honest interaction with the world, a direct opposite to the transactional, one-sided relationships I had allowed myself to be drawn into before. I found that my patience, once stretched thin by Martha and Robert's demands, was abundant when helping a curious child navigate the nonfiction section or assisting an elderly patron with the computer catalog. This was the kind of human connection I valued, built on mutual respect and genuine interest, not on manipulation or obligation. My perspective on wealth and possession also underwent a profound transformation. While I had always valued hard work and prudence, I now understood the sacred trust that came with ownership, especially of a home. My house was no longer just an asset. It was a living testament to my identity, a fortress of my spirit. The memory of Martha and Robert's casual entitlement, their blatant disregard for my efforts and my sanctuary, served as a constant, if distant, reminder of the importance of boundaries. My generosity, once expansive and indiscriminate, became a carefully considered act. I learned to distinguish between true need and entitled demand, between genuine hardship and self-inflicted woes. I still believed in helping others, but with wisdom and discernment. I would offer advice, guidance, and support, but rarely unearned financial aid that would only perpetuate dependency. It was a subtle but fundamental shift, a hardening of my core, not out of cruelty, but out of a profound understanding of self-preservation and the true meaning of empowering others. Cynthia, I sometimes thought of her, particularly when an old song on the radio would stir a memory, or I would see something that reminded me of a shared past. The sharpness of the betrayal had long since dulled, replaced by a deep-seated melancholy for what could have been. I often wondered if she had found the strength I had hoped for her, if she had managed to break free from the gravitational pull of her parents' influence. I received an occasional update through Mr. Harrison, who handled her divorce settlement and property division. He informed me, in his typically understated manner, that Cynthia had indeed moved further afield, seeking a fresh start. There was no bitterness in my heart, only a quiet acknowledgement that some paths diverge, and some bonds, once believed to be unbreakable, are simply not meant to endure the tests of greed and manipulation. My sorrow for her was akin to mourning a dream, a vision of a shared future that had simply ceased to exist, replaced by a starker, truer reality. The ongoing saga of Martha and Robert Peterson continued to reach me through the town's efficient grapevine, usually through the innocuous chatter at the grocery store or the casual comments from fellow volunteers. Their tiny, run-down apartment in a less desirable part of the state had, it seemed, only amplified their already contentious relationship. I heard whispers of their constant arguments, their blame games, and their increasingly desperate attempts to launch new, equally ill-fated ventures. Their artisanal candle business, resurrected in a smaller, shabbier iteration, quickly sputtered and died, leaving behind only more debt and disillusionment. The phone call from the real estate agent had been just the beginning. They had been forced to liquidate the last remnants of any property they owned, barely enough to cover a fraction of their creditors. They were now, I understood, truly adrift, completely reliant on their own meager resources, stripped of the safety net I had unknowingly provided for so many years. There was no joy in hearing of their misfortune, no triumphant surge of "I told you so." Instead, there was a solemn understanding that karma, patient and relentless, had simply run its course. They had reaped what they had sown, their grand schemes and entitled attitudes finally catching up to them in a way I could never have orchestrated. One crisp autumn afternoon, almost 2 years after the incident, I found myself in downtown Willow Creek Heights, running errands. As I walked past the bustling coffee shop, I caught sight of a familiar figure sitting alone at an outdoor table, sipping a coffee. It was Robert Peterson. He looked noticeably older, his once booming laugh lines etched into permanent furrows of discontent. His shoulders were slumped, and his usually meticulously coiffed hair was disheveled. He seemed to be staring blankly into the middle distance, a shadow of the man who had once swaggered into my living room and claimed my remote control. I paused, hidden partially by a large oak tree, and observed him for a moment. There was no one with him, no Martha to berate him, no Cynthia to placate him. He looked utterly alone, consumed by a quiet, desolate weariness. Our eyes met for a fleeting second. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed quickly by a grimace of something that looked like shame, perhaps even a hint of fear. He quickly averted his gaze, busying himself with stirring his coffee. I simply nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible gesture, and continued on my way. There was no need for words, no need for confrontation. The sight of him, diminished and solitary, spoke volumes. It was a silent testament to the irreversible consequences of his choices, a personal encounter with the quiet, devastating justice that had been meted out. My steps were lighter as I continued down the street, a sense of profound clarity settling over me. That brief encounter with Robert had cemented my understanding. My path was clear, unburdened by past grievances or lingering bitterness. My life was filled with purpose, with quiet joys, and with genuine connections. My home was a sanctuary, my garden a testament to resilience, and my heart, though scarred, was stronger, wiser, and more deeply at peace than it had ever been. I had discovered that true strength wasn't about holding onto anger or seeking dramatic retribution, but about reclaiming one's life with dignity, precision, and an unwavering commitment to one's own truth. The elegant justice I had orchestrated had not just protected my home, it had fundamentally reshaped me, molding me into a man who understood the profound value of self-respect, boundaries, and the quiet power of simply living an authentic life. My story in Willow Creek Heights continues, not with grand pronouncements, but with the steady, confident stride of a man who has truly come home, not just to his house, but to himself, a testament to the enduring power of elegant, hard-won peace.